Welcome to True Echo, where real struggles meet unforgettable triumphs. Today's story is unlike any you've heard. It's about a boy who had nothing, no piano, no privilege, not even a proper classroom, yet somehow turned cardboard into a concert hall. This isn't just about music. It's about resilience, legacy, and the echo of a dream that refused to die. Stay with us as we follow the astonishing journey of Elijah Freeman, from silence to symphony. You practiced on cardboard? The judge scoffed, his tone heavy with disbelief, echoing through the grand hall like a slap. Around Elijah the audience laughed, nervously, mockingly. But Elijah stood still. His shoulders were narrow, his sneakers scuffed, his jeans a size too short. He didn't speak right away. He didn't have to. The room had already made its judgment. But what they didn't see was the boy who had learned music by memory. Not from sheet music, but from cassette tapes and silence. They didn't know about the nights in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, where a single Sharpie and a piece of cardboard taped to the kitchen table became his Steinway. Or the mother who, after working back-to-back janitorial shifts, would sit with him at 2 a.m. and hum the harmonies she remembered from Sunday Mass. I practiced, Elijah said softly, voice barely audible beyond the front row. A boy in a gray suit, Lincoln Masters, the reigning champion, laughed from the corner. Practiced on what? The counter at Wendy's? Elijah looked up. His eyes weren't fiery. They were quiet, dusk-colored and heavy with the kind of patience that only suffering can teach. On cardboard, he said. The silence that followed wasn't out of respect. It was colder, confusion peppered with ridicule. The judges leaned forward. One of them even smirked. Is this a talent show or a comedy routine? But before Elijah could be dismissed, a man in the back cleared his throat. Mr. Donnelly. No one paid him much attention. Just another volunteer. But he stepped forward and his voice, rough, tired and firm, broke through the tension. The boy earned his place. He beat 24 trained students in the open qualifiers. Blindfolded. Note for note he matched a Mozart sonata. That's why I brought him here. There were murmurs, eyebrows raised, scrolling tablets flicked faster. Still the judge sighed. All right. You get 2 minutes, then we move on. Elijah didn't walk to the gleaming grand piano in the center. He walked toward the upright in the corner, the practice piano, dusty and out of tune. But a woman blocked his path. That's off limits. Mr. Donnelly stepped in again. Let the boy play. And play he did. He sat, not like a competitor but like someone coming home. His fingers hovered above the chipped keys, not from nerves but reverence. Then he closed his eyes, and silence fell like a curtain. The room held its breath. He played a G major chord. Then another. Then cascaded into a piece no one recognized, not Chopin, not Bach, not Beethoven. It was his. Born from kitchen smells and bus breaks outside his window. Composed in pencil on brown paper bags. Played 1,000 times in his head, on his lap, on cardboard traced and retraced by a mother's hand. People stopped whispering. Even Lincoln sat forward, unsure what he was hearing. This wasn't performance, it was story. Hunger. Hope. Rage wrapped in resilience. When Elijah finished, no one clapped. Not right away. Not out of rudeness but because no one wanted to be the first to break the spell. Then Donnelly clapped. Then another. And soon the entire room rose, not in enthusiasm but in awakening. Elijah stepped away from the bench. That's what cardboard sounds like when you believe it's real, he said and left. Outside Mr. Donnelly was waiting. You think they'll let me back in? Elijah asked. Donnelly smiled. They didn't let you in, son. You kicked the door open. That night, the city outside returned to its usual blur of neon signs, passing trains, and sirens echoing through the damp streets. But in a cramped apartment above a laundromat on 7th and Hollis, time moved differently. It was louder somehow, every creak in the floor, every hiss of the radiator, every footstep from the upstairs neighbor rehearsing for war. Elijah sat at the kitchen table, dinner pushed aside. The rice and eggs had gone cold, the canned vegetables barely touched. In front of him lay a battered notebook, pages filled with scrawled bars of music, some smudged from erased mistakes, others sharp and deliberate like carved stone. Next to it, stretched across the table like sacred scripture, was the cardboard piano. 17 white keys. 12 black. Faded marker, fraying corners, and a dozen years of dreams etched into its surface. He ran his fingers over the drawn notes, not playing, just remembering. A soft voice broke the silence. Elijah. His mother stood in the doorway, dressed in her janitor uniform. Black sneakers, gray slacks, a faded polo shirt with a torn patch from the elementary school where she cleaned. Her hands were red from bleach. Her hair pulled back with a clip that had lost half its teeth. But her eyes, those always shone when she looked at him. "You need sleep, baby." He glanced up, dark circles under his eyes. "I just needed to feel the keys again." She walked over, kissed his forehead. "You always do." They didn't talk about the performance. Not about the whispers that had already started to circle online. Not about the blurry cell phone video a judge had quietly posted. The one that was spreading with captions like, "Who is this kid?" and "Cardboard Prodigy stuns judges." No, they didn't trust the world to keep its promises. Attention came like rain, sudden, messy, and often too late. She sat across from him, untying her shoes. "You remember the first time you saw a piano?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "I was 5. At Sunday school." "And you tried to crawl inside of it?" She laughed softly. "Said the music was hiding inside. Said you wanted to find the person playing it." "I still do," he whispered. She reached across the table, her hand rough from work, but gentle as always. "You are that person now." He didn't cry. He never did. Not since his father left when he was 7, promising to find work and send money back. That money never came. Neither did he. She stood, pulled on her windbreaker. "I'll be back before sunrise." He nodded, then watched her leave, her keys jingling behind her like a distant piano. When the door shut, Elijah opened the window. Let the night in. Let the cold air touch his skin and sharpen his senses. And then he played. Not on a piano. Not even on a keyboard. On cardboard. His fingers moved in total silence, tapping invisible chords, tracing invisible melodies. His head tilted with the music that existed only in his mind. Outside, you'd swear the apartment was haunted, haunted by soundless beauty. Down below, parked in a beat-up Buick, Mr. Donnelly sat watching the light in Elijah's window. He didn't believe in signs. He believed in practice. But something stirred in him that night. Something like faith. The next morning came wrapped in a chill and gold light. Elijah woke to the clang of a garbage truck and the softer sound of his mother's gentle snoring on the couch. She never made it to bed after night shifts. He tiptoed past her, grabbed his notebook and carefully folded the cardboard. He walked to the park, the one with the cracked fountain and chipped benches. That was his conservatory. No tower of ivory, no red carpet, just trees and pigeons and sky. He sat on his usual bench, unfolded the keys, began to practice. People stared, of course. They always had. A boy tapping air, playing music no one else could hear. But today a woman stopped. "Are you that boy from the music video?" she asked, her dog sniffing his shoe. "I don't know. Maybe. I showed it to my niece. She's a music teacher." She cried. Elijah smiled, unsure what to say. Later that afternoon, behind a church gymnasium, Mr. Donnelly waited with an old Yamaha keyboard, yellowed keys, a few notes that stuck. To Elijah it was better than gold. They rehearsed for hours. Donnelly barking instructions like a drill sergeant. Fingers higher. No lazy wrists. Again. 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 Elijah never complained. He wanted it. Needed it. During a break, Donnelly handed him water and said, "You know the difference between a genius and a miracle?" Elijah shook his head. "A genius you train. A miracle, you don't see coming." Elijah looked at his hands. "Which one am I?" "You're both." That night, Mr. Donnelly handed him an envelope. "What's this?" Elijah asked. "Application for the winter concerto. Scholarships. Conservatories. A donor saw your video and paid your entrance fee." Elijah held the envelope like it might catch fire. "I don't know if I'm ready." "You were born ready," Donnelly said. "They just weren't ready for you." The envelope sat on the kitchen table for 3 days. Elijah didn't ignore it. He just walked around it, like it was a lion sleeping in the middle of the room. His mother never pushed, just glanced at it once or twice. She knew that pressure turned his silence to iron. Finally, one night, while she folded laundry, she said softly, "If you don't fill it out, someone else will get your spot." He paused, mid-sketch on a napkin. "What if I mess up, Ma? What if I freeze?" She walked over, placed her hand on his shoulder. "They already said you didn't belong. And you played anyway." That night, after she went to bed, he filled out the application. Carefully. Trembling. And sealed it. 2 weeks later, he received the email. He was in. Regional bracket. Dead last on the list. They misspelled his name, Elijah Freeman. He didn't say anything. Just packed his school bag, swept the kitchen, and went to school under gray skies and heavier dreams. He'd learned not to celebrate too soon. At Roosevelt High no one believed it. One classmate laughed, "You forged it." Another said, "Please? That's for prodigies." Even his own music teacher smiled politely and said, "Just remember, sweetheart, these competitions are very political." Elijah nodded. Then spent his lunch break tapping fingerings on the back of a cafeteria tray. Meanwhile, Mr. Donnelly borrowed an old digital piano from a church. Set up rehearsals in a boarded-up theater. Ran it off a generator. Elijah played under flickering flashlights, surrounded by torn velvet chairs and peeling walls. It wasn't glamorous. It was holy. "You're not memorizing," Donnelly barked. "You're internalizing. You want to understand why Rachmaninoff played like the world was ending? Because for him it was." One night, Elijah played a nocturne so raw, so aching, that even the shadows seemed to lean in. Donnelly didn't say a word. Just placed a hand on his shoulder. "They won't be ready for you." At school the air changed. Not dramatically, not with fanfare, but with subtle shifts that Elijah felt more than saw. People had stopped laughing, but they hadn't started listening either. Now they watched him like someone waiting for a crack to show. Some students started playing classical music loudly in the hall when he passed. Some did exaggerated hand gestures, mocking piano motions with cartoonish flair. And Lincoln Masters, immaculate as always in a gray wool blazer and leather shoes, never missed a chance to remind Elijah where he thought he belonged. They met one afternoon outside the band room. Lincoln wasn't alone. Two boys flanked him, grinning like hyenas. "I heard you're in the winter concerto," Lincoln said casually as if discussing the weather. Elijah didn't reply. He didn't stop walking. Lincoln fell into step beside him. "You do realize they don't award pity points, right? This isn't a viral stunt. It's a stage." Still nothing. "Stay home, Freeman," Lincoln muttered with venom wrapped in velvet. "Let the real musicians do their job." Elijah didn't turn. He didn't raise his voice. But when he got home he played with hands that shook, not from fear but fury. Each note sharp, clean, deliberate. He didn't cry. His fingers did that for him. Mr. Donnelly didn't interrupt. Just listened from the aisle like a priest at confession. The night before the competition rain came hard. It drummed on the window like an impatient audience. Elijah sat on the kitchen floor with his cardboard keys, tracing scales silently. His mother came in with 2 mugs of tea and a pair of wool socks. "You ready?" He nodded. "Scared?" He hesitated. "A little." She sat beside him, curling her legs under her. "When you were 6 you had a fever. Couldn't move. But I played that cassette, the one with Horowitz, and you sat up like the music woke you from the inside." "I remember," he said quietly. She smiled and tucked the socks over his feet. "You've always had music in you, baby. It's not just what you do. It's who you are. So go remind them." The next morning came soaked in sunlight and fog. Elijah dressed in his best, an oversized white shirt, a sweater with a dangling thread, and pants ironed stiff despite their age. His mother combed his hair carefully, packed a lunch he'd never eat, and kissed his forehead 3 times. Once for courage, once for focus, once for peace. At the bus stop, Mr. Donnelly waited with a folder under his arm. They rode in silence. Not because they had nothing to say but because everything had already been said in music. The venue loomed like a courthouse made of marble and glass. Elijah stepped inside and felt instantly small. Students in custom suits and elegant dresses crowded the check-in desk. Their parents adjusted their collars, patted their shoulders, whispered like political advisors before a debate. Elijah stood alone. "Name?" the woman behind the desk asked, not looking up. "Elijah Freeman." She frowned at her screen. "Ilya? You're last." He nodded. She handed him a badge and didn't smile. The waiting room was tense. Dozens of competitors lined the chairs, some practicing fingerings, others murmuring into earpieces. Lincoln Masters was already there, chatting with a judge like they were old friends. Elijah took the seat farthest from the others. No one acknowledged him. No one needed to. His presence alone said everything they thought was a joke. The backstage hallway smelled like varnish and anxiety. Elijah sat alone on a cold plastic chair, hands tucked under his thighs to keep warm. The other students had gloves, heat packs, instructors whispering breathing exercises. Elijah had cardboard. And memory. He could hear it in his head. The cassette, the pauses, the long decays of chords that lasted longer than silence. He focused on the torn plaster on the wall across from him. A single crack ran from ceiling to floor like a scar. A girl in a silver dress exited the stage, face pale and hands shaking. Elodie Morin, very promising, a judge muttered as he scribbled. The MC's voice called out, "Next contestant, Lincoln Masters." A wave passed through the room. Heads turned. Phones lifted. Someone whispered, "Watch this." Lincoln rose like he'd just been handed a crown. As he passed Elijah, he paused. "They've seen the best now," he whispered. "Anything after this will feel like leftovers." Elijah said nothing. Just kept staring at that crack in the wall. Then came the applause. Thunderous. The kind that doesn't wait for the last note. Judges rose. Coaches beamed. Lincoln emerged smiling like the victory had been carved into marble. Elijah Freeman. No fanfare. Just a name. He rose like a shadow stretching into light. Walked slowly down the hallway. Not rehearsed. Remembered. Every step echoing the sound of worn sneakers on linoleum floors in a dark apartment hallway. The concert hall was gold-lit and cathedral quiet. The Steinway gleamed under the spotlight like a throne waiting for its ruler. He bowed not low. Just enough. Then sat. There was no nod. No flick of the wrist. No show. Just two hands placed gently on keys. And then, music. Not a known composition. Not even a borrowed one. A blend. A memory. A conversation between centuries. Bach in the left hand. Chopin in the phrasing. Gershwin's defiance in the dissonance. But mostly it was Elijah. He didn't look down. He looked ahead. And every note pulled silence closer. Phones were lowered. Judges leaned forward. Even Lincoln sat up straighter. The middle section came like an exhale. Nostalgia and joy wrapped in hunger and gratitude. He played the sound of boiled rice and empty wallets, of birthdays skipped and cassette tapes rewound 1,000 times. He played the sound of hope. When he reached the final chord, he didn't strike it. He released it. Slowly. Gently. Like a sigh that had waited a decade. Then silence. A holy silence. And then it broke. Applause, not roaring, not forced, but like sunrise through fog. One judge stood. Then another. Then everyone. Even Lincoln. Elijah didn't linger. He bowed once, eyes calm. Then stepped off stage like it was just another kitchen floor. Backstage, Mr. Donnelly waited, his eyes glistening. "You didn't play like you wanted to win," he said. "I didn't," Elijah replied. "I played like I didn't want to regret." Donnelly smiled. "Remind me to write that down." Outside the auditorium, the night clung to Elijah's skin like a second breath, sharp and electric. The theater doors opened behind him. Voices spilled into the cold. Programs rustled. Camera phones flashed like fireflies in a storm. But Elijah didn't turn around. He stood still, his hands tingling, his breath fogging the air in soft bursts. He wasn't waiting for applause. He was listening, for silence. That sacred kind of silence that comes after truth has been spoken. The kind that meant they heard him. Then came the voice. "You're through to the finals, kid," Mr. Donnelly said, stepping beside him with a quiet nod. "I figured you didn't check the score." "I didn't need to," Elijah replied. "You're dangerous when you know who you are." They walked together to the bus stop. No limo. No reporters yet. Just footsteps and night air. At home, his mother was asleep on the couch. An envelope lay on her chest. Another bill. Overdue water. The heater was already groaning like it was breathing its last. Elijah pulled a blanket over her gently, slid the bill into his pocket, and sat down at the kitchen table. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. His fingers tapped rhythms into the air, reliving the performance again and again. The hush of the crowd. The way the final chord rang like forgiveness. The look on Lincoln's face, not hate, not envy, but disbelief. By dawn, the video had already surfaced online. Someone had recorded his performance from the balcony, shaky, vertical, grainy. But it didn't matter. The music was clear. And the internet didn't care about lighting or camera angles when the truth was too loud to ignore. The comments came fast. "Just cried in my kitchen. This kid is a storm wrapped in soul. He plays like he's carrying his family on his back." By the time Elijah reached school, the teachers knew. Some tried to hide it. Others smiled faintly. Miss Dorsey, his own music teacher, the one who once offered polite discouragement, stood at her desk, stunned, watching the video again and again. "Elijah," she called as he passed. He turned. I didn't know," she said, voice thin. He nodded kindly. "It's okay. I wasn't ready to be known before." The hallway buzzed. Students nodded at him now. Some whispered. A few clapped him on the back. One took a selfie without asking. It wasn't fame. Not yet. It was curiosity wrapped in awe. That afternoon, Elijah found Lincoln outside the music building, sitting on the back stairs, alone. No entourage. No perfect posture. Just a boy, shoulders sagged, staring at nothing. Elijah approached slowly. "I watched your video," Lincoln said without looking up. "Twice." Elijah waited. "You played like it was your last day on earth." "That's how I learned to play," Elijah replied softly. "One day at a time. Like it could all be gone tomorrow." Lincoln exhaled. For once, no mockery in his voice. Just something close to understanding. "They were wrong about you." "They still are," Elijah said. "But it's getting harder for them to hold on to it." Lincoln looked up, studying him. Then he nodded, a small, quiet truce. That night, Elijah returned to the shuttered theater. It was cold. Dust hung in the air like breath. But the keyboard was still there, Mr. Donnelly's gift. Yellowed keys, a few broken. Sacred. He didn't wait. He sat and began composing. Not from cassette. Not from memory. From inside. The left hand repeated a trembling motif. The right wandered, uncertain. Then stronger. Then bold. It sounded like survival. Like light trying to push through cracks. Hours passed. Mr. Donnelly arrived late. He stood in the wings, arms folded, tears unspoken. He didn't interrupt. He knew this wasn't practice. It was prophecy. The next morning a message arrived. From the competition board. The final round would be moved. Due to viral interest and overwhelming public demand, it would now be held at Carne Hall, the most prestigious venue in the region. A place where legends had stood. Where ghosts of greatness still lingered in the chandeliers and velvet curtains. Elijah read the email at the kitchen table. His mother sat across from him. Hands over her mouth. Eyes wide. He didn't smile. Didn't cheer. He whispered, "It's time." Then went to the closet. Pulled out the cardboard keys. Folded them carefully. Slipped them into his backpack. Carne Hall didn't scream. It whispered. Its arches towered like a cathedral. Its windows glinted like stained glass. Its iron lamps stood like sentinels of forgotten dreams. Elijah stood at the bottom of the steps, his thrift store coat flapping in the wind, a borrowed suit folded neatly in his bag. His hands trembled, not from nerves. From history. Mr. Donnelly joined him. Scarf tight, hat crooked, eyes sharp. "This is it," he murmured. "It doesn't feel real." "That's how you know it is." Inside, the hall shimmered with gold and reverence. 100 feet above, angels were painted in a ceiling mural, playing lyres, frozen mid him. The stage lights were warm like heaven's glow. And in the center, the piano, a handmade Fazioli, worth more than the building Elijah had grown up in. He stared at it not with awe, but with quiet gratitude. Like a child meeting something he once thought was imaginary. Contestants rehearsed around the room, posture perfect, coach hovered. Elijah sat in the far left corner. Alone. He pulled out the cardboard. Laid it across his lap. And began rehearsing. Eyes closed. Fingers floating. Not for show. For remembrance. People stared. Whispered. Laughed. He didn't flinch. He was already playing. One by one, contestants were called. One by one, music rose and fell like waves against distant cliffs. Then, Lincoln. He walked with his chin high. His coach adjusted his sleeves. His mother kissed his forehead like royalty. He passed Elijah but didn't speak. This time there was tension in his jaw. A crease in his brow. The applause was loud. But not thunder. Some judges nodded. Some whispered. One frowned. "It's too safe," someone muttered. "Too perfect." Then, Elijah Freeman. A whisper on the speakers. He rose. No coach. No fanfare. Just a folded piece of cardboard and the truth in his chest. He walked the aisle slow, steady. As if every step was already a memory. From the stage he saw her. His mother. 4th row. Still in her work uniform. Hands clasped over her mouth. She didn't wave. She nodded. That was enough. He sat at the Fazioli. Placed his hands. Took a breath. And began. The first notes that spilled from the piano didn't fill the hall. They woke it. They arrived like whispers through cracked doors. Just 2 notes, tender and trembling, resting together like a memory too sacred to speak aloud. Then came a breath in the left hand, a soft ripple in the right, and something in the auditorium shifted. Not just the air. The attention. This wasn't performance. This was prayer. Elijah didn't move dramatically. His hands barely lifted from the keys. No showmanship, no flair. His eyes stayed half lowered, focused not on the audience, not even on the keys, but on a point between memory and imagination. A place only he could see. He wasn't playing music. He was telling it. The melody unfolded like a confession. It carried the sound of hunger, not just the stomach kind, but the aching, bone-deep hunger for space, for oxygen, for someone to say, "I see you." He wove in the shuffle of his mother's sneakers after night shifts, the distant thrum of city buses outside a cracked window, the creak of floorboards in a home where every step was calculated to avoid waking her. He played the sound of cardboard. Not just the thing but the meaning, the faith of it, the belief that something as flimsy as cardboard could carry symphonies if you just refused to let go. Some in the audience sat stunned, their hands frozen in mid-clap from the last performance. Some leaned forward, unsure why they were crying. One judge's pen slid slowly off the desk and hit the floor, but he didn't pick it up. He was afraid to miss a single note. Lincoln stood in the wings, his mouth half open, jaw clenched. He'd played perfectly. Elijah was playing honestly. There's a difference, and the audience felt it. The middle passage shifted. Suddenly it wasn't sorrow anymore. It was fight. A subtle defiance ran through the bass. The right hand danced, improvising off a core motif like a boy taking his first breath after years underwater. You could feel the grit in it, the resilience. It wasn't joyful, not yet, but it was rising. Like hope with a heartbeat. The final section approached. Elijah slowed. Not out of fear but respect. He leaned into the phrasing, held one note half a second longer, just enough to make the silence ache. Then the flourish. A blend of jazz and classical. A contradiction. A bridge. His last chord wasn't loud. It was deep. He didn't smash the keys. He pressed them like he was closing a book he didn't want to stop reading. Then he lifted his hands and that was it. Real silence returned. The kind that doesn't wait for permission to clap. The kind that stands as proof something sacred just happened. Then the audience stood. One by one. No one shouted. They rose. Not out of courtesy. But out of recognition. His mother didn't stand. She just placed her hand on her chest and mouthed one word, "Baby." Elijah stood from the bench, nodded once, not a bow, just acknowledgement, and walked off stage. Backstage, the moment he disappeared behind the curtain, a woman in heels rushed toward him. She wasn't a judge. She was a conservatory representative. Another followed her, then a man from Juilliard, then a publicist. Offers. Contracts. Scholarships. He said nothing. Not yet. He looked past them, searching the shadows until he found Donnelly. The old man stood in the far corner, holding something in his hands like an artifact. The cardboard. Donnelly's cheeks were wet. His voice cracked. "You didn't play for them." "No," Elijah said. "I played for the cardboard." The night outside Carne Hall felt changed. Not warmer, not louder, just different. People didn't rush to their cars. They lingered. Spoke in hushed voices. Some wept. Some just stared at the entrance as if expecting the building to speak again. Inside, Elijah stood alone near the stage door, his shirt damp from sweat, his hands trembling slightly. Mr. Donnelly approached slowly, reverently, holding the cardboard like it was made of porcelain. "Elijah," he whispered, "you just changed the temperature of the world." Elijah looked down at his hands. The scars. The calluses. The faint tremor in his right pinky. Every inch of his skin told a chapter of the story. "I didn't know it would feel like this," he said. "Like what?" "Like everything's loud but I'm still inside the quiet." Donnelly nodded. "That's what truth does. It roars even when you whisper it." The other contestants began to emerge. Some shook his hand. Some looked away. One, a girl in a green dress, bowed slightly. Not because she'd lost, but because she'd seen something she didn't know was possible. Even Lincoln approached. No tie. No bravado. Just a hand extended. Elijah took it. Their palms met like a closing chapter. Two boys raised in different worlds, now bound by something greater than rivalry. Music, truth, survival. Then the press descended. Microphones. Flashes. "Who trained you? How did you learn? Did you really play on cardboard? Who discovered you? What do you want now?" Elijah blinked into the noise. The same way he once blinked into darkness. Then his voice, quiet, hoarse, surfaced. "I don't want to be discovered," he said. "I want to be remembered." And silence followed. The heavy kind. The kind that didn't need applause to echo. Outside, his mother waited at the bottom of the steps. Still in her soaked sneakers. Her coat buttoned wrong. Her eyes swollen. She didn't shout. She didn't even speak. She just opened her arms. He collapsed into them, Not as a prodigy. Not as a performer. As her boy. You did it, she whispered. You made them listen. He didn't answer. Not yet. He just held her. Longer than he ever had. Then finally he pulled back. I didn't win yet, he murmured. She looked confused. What do you mean? There's no trophy that pays the rent. No medal that makes your hands stop hurting. She wiped his cheek gently. No. But it opens the door. And this time Elijah nodded. Because the door had been closed for a long, long time. And now it was wide open. The next morning the world was no longer quiet. Elijah's performance had been posted from a dozen angles. Some shaky cell phones, others clipped from the official stream, and even one from a journalist's GoPro mounted discreetly in the balcony. The internet, once skeptical, now moved like wildfire. One clip hit 1 million views in just 12 hours. Headlines bloomed across every corner of the web like wildfire through dry brush. Boy who practiced piano on cardboard stuns Carne Hall to tears. From nothing to everything, the Elijah Freeman story. Cardboard Prodigy redefines what talent looks like. By the time Elijah arrived at school, the air felt different. People who never acknowledged him suddenly smiled. Teachers who once overlooked him now offered long, quiet stares. Miss Dorsey stood outside her classroom, tears in her eyes and her phone playing his Carne Hall performance on loop. Elijah, she said as he passed. He paused. I always told myself talent can't be taught, she murmured. But you taught me. He nodded, gave her a soft smile and moved on. At lunch, a group of students offered him their seat. He declined. He wasn't interested in new attention. He was still learning how to breathe in it. That afternoon, as he crossed the quad, a guidance counselor stopped him with trembling fingers. There's a letter for you, she said, and handed him a thick cream-colored envelope with gold trim. The seal said Juilliard. Inside, a full scholarship. Tuition, room, board, private mentorship. Everything. He didn't run home. He didn't even cry. He just walked the long way back, letting the weight of what had just happened settle slowly, like dust after a storm. That night, Mr. Donnelly read the letter aloud while Elijah's mother sat beside him on their old thrift store couch, hands pressed to her cheeks in disbelief. Elijah didn't say much. But when the room fell silent, he asked the one question no one expected. Can I bring the cardboard? They looked at him. He wasn't joking. He didn't mean it as nostalgia. He meant it as essence. That cardboard wasn't just practice, it was proof. His first day at Juilliard was like stepping into a parallel universe. The campus shimmered with elegance. Marble floors, glass hallways, voices discussing Liszt and Ligeti between sips of imported coffee. He walked in carrying one small duffel and a wrapped rectangular package under his arm. The cardboard. Some students whispered. Others pointed. A few rolled their eyes. But when Elijah sat down at the Steinway in his very first class and began to play, truthfully, humbly, clearly, the room fell still. Not because it was loud, but because it was honest. He didn't play like a student desperate to impress. He played like a boy who used to pretend to hear music between the cracks of silence. And it worked. Dr. Aline Strauss, known across the school for breaking prodigies like twigs, stood with her arms folded, expression unreadable. When Elijah finished his self-composed piece, raw and aching, she simply said, again. He played it again. And this time the girl seated next to him cried. The whispers began to shift. Not mockery, curiosity. How did you compose that? Can I see your fingering on the third phrase? Where'd you learn that voicing? He answered gently. He never bragged. He remembered what it felt like to be laughed out of a room. Each night he practiced alone. Sometimes until 3 a.m. in rooms lit by buzzing fluorescents, tapping out arpeggios with fingers that still bore the muscle memory of cardboard. And still, doubt returned like a shadow with sharp teeth. Some critics online dismissed him as a viral moment. Some peers whispered that his scholarship was charity. And Elijah never responded with anger. He responded with practice. Then came the letter that changed everything, again. Hand-delivered to his dorm by the department head, with a wax seal and a trembling voice. Maestro Roberto Vanel, world-renowned conductor, had seen the Carne Hall performance and requested Elijah as the featured soloist in an upcoming gala concert at Lincoln Center. It wasn't just an honor. It was a test. The audience would be composed of critics, cultural giants, political donors, and the most demanding musical minds in the country. And Elijah wasn't just expected to play well. He was expected to prove that cardboard could echo inside cathedrals. At first, Elijah hesitated. Could he hold his own in front of a full symphony? Did he even want to stand in front of a world that once laughed at him? He called Mr. Donnelly that night. The old man's voice crackled through the phone like a vintage radio broadcast. "Kit," he said. "A piano doesn't choose who speaks through it. You do." So Elijah accepted. Rehearsals began that week. The orchestra was overwhelming: strings, winds, brass, percussion. Elijah was used to cardboard and silence. Now he had to navigate a tsunami of sound. The conductor, Vanel, paced like a general preparing for war. His baton sliced the air. His instructions were curt. But Elijah watched, listened, studied. And by the third rehearsal he asked something no one had ever dared. "Can I perform an original piece as the second movement?" Vanel froze. "You want to play your own music between Liszt and Tchaikovsky?" Elijah nodded. "Because it's the only way to connect them." A long pause. Then Vanel smiled like a man remembering something precious. "Play it." The night of the gala arrived dressed in tuxedos and velvet gowns. Lincoln Center shimmered like a temple carved from light. The lobby buzzed with names Elijah had only read in magazines. He walked past them all in a black suit. But inside his jacket he carried the cardboard, folded tight, wrapped like scripture. The curtain rose. The orchestra began with fire and thunder. The audience leaned forward, glasses gleaming, breath held. Then Elijah walked on stage. He didn't wave. He didn't bow. He sat and began to play. Not Liszt. Not yet. His own piece. The Cardboard Sonata. The first notes were soft, invisible, but they grew, layer by layer, note by note, until they sang. And that audience, critics, billionaires, dignitaries, forgot their posture, their pearls, their programs. They were transported to kitchens with linoleum floors, to cardboard taped across kitchen tables, to boys tracing notes in the dark while the world slept. And when he finished, the silence wept. No applause came at first. Just stillness. Then a single hand clap. Then two. Then a standing ovation that shook the floor. The conductor, trembling, turned and bowed to Elijah. And the audience followed. But Elijah didn't stay for the thunder. He walked off stage, past the handlers and journalists, past the reception room filled with champagne and murmured praise. He stepped into the night air, cool, damp, electric, and kept walking. Toward something deeper than victory. Toward remembrance. The city hummed around him. Horns blaring, headlights streaking, steam curling from manhole covers like ghosts rising from the pavement. But Elijah walked quietly through it all, the memory of Lincoln Center still clinging to his clothes like mist. He wasn't walking toward any grand after-party. No interviews, no red carpets, no champagne toasts. He was walking toward the park. The same one where he used to practice on cardboard. The same bench. The same rusted fountain, crooked lamppost, and graffiti-stained trash can that had been his audience long before anyone else listened. He sat down, slowly, carefully, then reached into his coat and pulled out the old cardboard piano. It was worn thinner now, edges soft, one of the black keys nearly gone from overuse. But it was still sacred. He laid it across his lap like an old friend. And he played. No sound. Just movement. Just memory. Tracing music only he could hear. Until a voice. "Still your favorite piano?" asked Mr. Donnelly. Elijah looked up, smiling faintly. The old man stood in his usual worn coat, his cap askew, eyes glinting like a star that refused to fade. "I figured I'd find you here," Donnelly said, lowering himself to the bench beside him. Elijah didn't speak for a moment. Just nodded. "I had to come back," he finally said. "You always do." They sat in silence, the kind shared only between people who've walked through fire together. Then Donnelly pulled a folded newspaper from his coat. On the front page, a photo of Elijah mid-performance. Fingers poised midair. Eyes closed. A single spotlight bathing him in gold. The headline read, "The Boy Who Played the World Still." Below it, a caption. Elijah Freeman redefines music with a symphony inspired by cardboard. Elijah didn't reach for it. He didn't need to. "I didn't do it for the headlines," he whispered. "I know," Donnelly said. "That's why they matter." Another pause. "You know," Donnelly continued, "they're offering you everything now. Tours, residencies, honorary degrees. Even asked if I'd speak at your doctorate ceremony." Elijah looked out at the quiet street beyond the park. Then he said, calm and clear, "I want to build something." Donnelly tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "I want to build for the next kid. The one tracing keys in the dark. The one who doesn't know yet that music's been waiting inside them all along." Donnelly blinked. "That's not a concert hall, Elijah. That's a revolution." Elijah met his eyes. "Exactly." And so he built it. With every interview, every performance, every donation from odd benefactors, Elijah laid the foundation for something more permanent than fame. He didn't start uptown. He started downtown, in a refurbished post office across from a bus depot. And he called it the Freeman School of Sound. Free tuition. No auditions. No dress code. No pedigree. Just heart. On the lobby wall, mounted in a case made of museum-grade glass, was the cardboard. The original. A single sheet of faded, frayed, sharp-stained cardboard. Above it a brass plaque engraved with the words, "From silence, music. From cardboard, flight." Elijah Freeman. Students touched the glass as they walked by. Some paused. Some bowed. Some tapped it like a sacred relic. For them it wasn't an artifact. It was proof. The day the school opened, a girl named Anya came in, eyes downcast, clutching something behind her back. Elijah knelt beside her. "What's your name?" "Anya," she whispered. "Do you play?" She nodded. "With what?" She revealed it, a cardboard keyboard taped to the back of a cereal box. Elijah looked at it like it was gold. Then he said the words no one had ever said to him when he needed them most. "Welcome, Anya. You belong here." The Freeman School didn't sound like Juilliard or Carne Hall. It sounded like pencils tapping rhythm on desks, like laughter between scales, like silence turning slowly into song. And once a year on the school's founding day, Elijah played. Not as a prodigy, not as a celebrity, just as a reminder. He'd walk barefoot to the stage. No tux, just a plain sweater. And before he played, he'd set something on the piano lid. The original cardboard, torn corner and all. He played not to impress, but to return. To the cracked window. To the creaking radiator. To the cassette player with Horowitz hissing under static. And everyone listened. Because in that music was something deeper than technique. There was truth. Then something unexpected happened. Kids all over the country, then the world, began posting videos of themselves playing on cardboard. Some used paper. Others used chalk drawings on wood floors. Some sang the harmonies. Others beatboxed the rhythm. They called it the Cardboard Symphony. It was a movement, built not on polish but on purpose. And with it came change. Donations to music programs. Scholarships. Teachers in underfunded schools drawing piano keys on desks again. Mothers buying old cassette players at thrift stores. Because one boy showed the world that music doesn't come from privilege. It comes from belief. Years passed. The Freeman School expanded. More buildings. More cities. More lives. But Elijah never stopped teaching. And on the days he needed to remember who he was, he returned to the park bench. And drew a new set of cardboard keys. Not to play something new, but to remember what silence once asked of him. And how he answered. Sometimes the most powerful music doesn't come from ivory keys or grand stages. It comes from cardboard. From struggle. From silence. Elijah Freeman didn't ask to be discovered. He demanded to be heard. And in doing so, he opened the door for a generation of unheard voices. So what's the lesson? If you've ever felt invisible, underestimated, or unheard, don't wait for a stage. Build your own. Use what you have, where you are, and start playing. Because belief is louder than doubt. And cardboard? Cardboard is just a beginning. If you were moved by Elijah's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to True Echo. Leave a comment below. What's the cardboard in your life?